Florida State loses a quarterback commitment, but there's good news on that front still. And the Noles also add a running back.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. We got a lot to discuss today on this show. Towards the end, I'm going to discuss the newly committed Florida State Seminole. That is Amari Clemons. He's out of the Panhandle. It's a really exciting player that I've discussed a little bit here at Locked On Seminoles. Beforehand, though, we have a ton of different things to discuss at the most important position in sport, quarterback. Brady Smigiel has decommitted. Why? What is next for Florida State? And the two or three players that I think are most likely for the Noles to pursue and why. So let's begin with Smigiel and his decommitment. From the greater Los Angeles area, when I interviewed him last summer down in Florida at the Future 50 event held by Under Armour at IMG Academy, he told me that he just loved the campus. He felt like he was at home. He really liked Mike Norvell, the staff. But that was before the disastrous 2024 season and the whitewashing of the coaching staff with so many different pieces leaving and also being added. He is no longer in the fold. He's a pocket quarterback who can extend plays a little bit. He does not, quite frankly, fit the scheme that Gus Malzahn runs. It's just the way it is. It's nobody's fault, but the scheme is not a fit for Brady. I kind of hinted a little bit about that because there was a report a while back. He was happy with the in-home he had, and I'm like, I can't believe that he's just not a great fit for what Gus does. I've covered Malzahn when he was at UCF. I'm like, I don't see that working. Less than 2 months later, he's decommitted, and we're moving along. Matter of fact, less than a month. I don't think that anybody should be shocked by this. That's number one. If you lose a really good quarterback commitment, it's rare that it's a good thing. This is that exception. When there's a coordinator change and the new hire comes in with a much different idea on what that player should be doing from each snap, sometimes it's better to part ways now instead of later and wasting a recruiting class, because anytime you miss a quarterback, there's the danger your program taking a step back, not treading water, but literally going in reverse. So Florida State loses Brady Smigiel, but they're also going to be looking at a lot of different guys that are mobile quarterbacks. And for the next 10, 15 minutes, we're going to be discussing that. And I have some questions that I want to ask first, and I'll come back to them and yet ask them again. But I want you to hear the questions, think about them, comment down below, YouTube, wherever it may be. Let's hear what you have to say. But if nothing else, just understand that these questions are meant for you to take them in and then also listen to some of the kids they're recruiting, because it's a very complex situation at quarterback. Every guy you take has more than just the talent that you're bringing in as an influencer. So number one here, should Florida State take one or two quarterback recruits in this cycle with the new style coming in? Do they need to get at least two guys that can really run, etc.? That's something to think about. Number two, should Florida State only really recruit a truly mobile quarterback? I'm talking about a guy that can make you look silly in a one-on-one situation where you're trying to tackle. Not a guy that extends plays. Let me be very clear. A guy that is borderline a running back / receiver. He's so athletic. And then finally, can Florida State not only get another quarterback early for the class of 2026, but can they get one early enough and it's good enough that his cachet allows the Noles to help recruit other players, offensive linemen, running backs, tight ends, and receivers? Those are the three questions I have, and I think all of them will bear out some fruit here, because this is a game of politics with quarterback recruiting. Florida State, Baylor, Tennessee, USC, Boston College, I don't care who it is. There are certain political things that come from the quarterback position that are unlike any other. And I want to break those down now. Number one, there's this misconception that if a guy's a really good runner and he's a quarterback, he's not really a good passer. That's not true. Lamar Jackson aside, there are several guys that can really run who are good quarterbacks. When I was growing up, John Elway was one of my favorite players, and needless to say, he was a freak athlete. He was arguably the best player in the New York Yankees baseball system at one point. He was such a good athlete. I'm not saying there's somebody like that out there. He's one of the greatest prospects of all time, but there are several different guys. And just because Florida State is leaning towards a more run-first kind of guy doesn't mean he can't throw. And just because Gus didn't have consistent success at UCF doesn't mean he can't do it at Florida State either. He's going to get better athletes here. Overall, he is. So you need to look at that too. The other part of this, location, location, location. This is the political side of it that is awkward because teams are going to recruit against you telling recruits that are receivers or tight, hey, don't go there. They're not getting the right kind of quarterback. Florida State's going to run into some of that. That's why they not only need to take a guy that can run and throw, but it has been proven. There's a ton of film. There's a lot of chemistry between what he does and his high school receivers. And it's not just a one-man show making everybody miss and he scores these crazy touchdowns. Here's the other part of it, though. Where's that kid from? Like I said, location, location, location. It is best, if at all possible, that you not only get an elite quarterback for Florida State, you get somebody that's either in Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, something that's connected to the state of Florida, maybe South Carolina, if you can, because there's a lot of hurt feelings, 7-on-7 coaches, high school coaches, etc. And I know college guys, I've talked to several different staffs. Oh, I don't care about that. I don't believe that for a second. Quarterback in particular, if I can, I want a kid local because it will help you with recruiting local receivers, local offensive linemen, local running backs. They know each other. What do I talk about all the time in college football recruiting with Florida State and everybody else? Relationships. You can get a local kid or somebody that's within like a 4 or 5 hour radius of Tallahassee. It's probably best. Maybe it's a Miami kid that's a little further away, but it's still state of Florida. Those things to put into play are important long-term for Florida State. So here are a few of the kids that are in the mix, and this board could expand. And I have one guy that I'll talk about in the next few minutes that I think will end up being the focal point. I could be wrong. This is when I get to that point, I'll state this again. 100% my speculation. Let me say that again. My speculation. And it's due to proximity, but we'll get into that. A few of the guys that are in the mix, for instance, the quarterback from Texas, and I love him, Bo Bentley. He's out of Salina. It's just outside of Dallas, state championship, over 50 touchdowns. That's first year start. Incredible. But he's a North Texas guy. That's going to be hard to get him. He's got Florida State and everybody else going after him now. He's a really good player. 6 foot, 6'2", somewhere in that range. It doesn't matter if you're a mobile guy quite as much. But he can really throw, and he's just really good at the clutch play. He's the kind of guy I'd love to have in my program, and I wouldn't care where I was at. I would at least recruit him. That being stated, again, remember, he's from the Lone Star State. Not only is it harder to recruit him, he's not going to know as many guys as some of the local kids. 2, staying in the Lone Star State, a kid they just offered, who I think has the highest upside of any player in the class of 26, somebody I mentioned last week, Keisean Henderson. He had told me about a week or so ago at Miami Battle, the big 7-on-7 tournament that happens in South Florida every year, that Florida State was recruiting him, hadn't offered as a quarterback, but they were recruiting him. It's like, cool. I'm glad to know that. I was just like, who's still coming after you? It was just a generic question. And he didn't know that I covered Florida State, but he brought them up. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. He mentioned Florida, Florida State, Georgia, LSU. The board had really expanded, even though he was committed to Houston. Speaking of which, he lives in the greater Houston area. While Henderson's an incredible talent, he's still a kid in the state of Texas. Everybody knows who he is. And again, I have him ranked higher than anybody, but at the same time, that's a kid in Texas. The other kid, and again, this board could expand even today before I get done with this podcast. It might. You never know with recruiting. Landon Duckworth plays at Jackson High School in Mobile, Alabama. He's a great basketball player. He's a great football player. He's a kid that would be good at hockey if you taught him how to skate. Just a freak athlete. 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds, give or take. Can really run. The first clip on his junior film, he did everything wrong and scored from over 90 yards. Literally did everything wrong. Didn't have good ball security. Didn't quite evade the rush the way he should have. But he made so many guys miss. It's hilarious. And Mobile is a really good city for high school football. He's pinned down to about his own 2-yard line. He makes several guys miss. Runs up the middle. Makes a couple more guys miss. And then just outruns everybody else and scores. Did everything that you shouldn't do, but still put the ball in the end zone. That's the kind of physical talent he has. That is the improvision that so many, there's a certain quarterback that just left Florida State who's now in the NFL that you could throw that out, but he's in that mold. But when you watch the throwing motion for Duckworth, it's really interesting because he's a guy that changes the game there too. And I want you to think about that as we get ready to come back and talk more about him and the quarterback board as it evolves, because this is a really unique situation. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you are going to get away with any money back. After the waiting, wondering, and worrying, some more. Now taxes, it's about matching with TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find your every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, every other thing that you could possibly want and get it done with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no worrying, no worries. Now, this is getting your taxes done. Get an expert with TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. The quarterback position as it evolves, whether you have Gus Malzahn or anybody else, you need to be able to make plays from the pocket. When I flipped on Duckworth's film, and I'd seen him play before, I met him on a recruiting visit that he was on at Auburn once, great kid. Just didn't know if he would be able to do the things that I ended up seeing his junior year. Natural throwing motion. He could throw the deep ball. He would take the under route when he needed it. He didn't always, shall we say, force the football or use just really bad technique. A lot of kids that are gifted, like a Landon Duckworth, they lose sight of the big picture on how to be a quarterback from play to play. And even as a junior, he's had some good coaching, but more importantly, he's taken to it. Excuse me. It's not that he's not a great athlete who could take off more, but he's starting to see the field better. The difference between Duckworth as a sophomore and as a junior is insane. Less than a year ago, I would have told you, much like Keisean Henderson, I'm like, I don't know if this kid's going to work out as a quarterback. The development for both of them, quite frankly, to their credit, is tremendous. Natural throwing motion, throw over the top, happy to sit in the pocket, not get antsy if the guys aren't open right away. That's one of the first signs of a quarterback who's still more runner than passer, whether he wants to admit it or not. Leaving the pocket when there's not something to leave the pocket for. In other words, your pass protection's done its job. Duckworth did a pretty good job of that for the most part watching his film. Having stated that, it still comes down to a few basic things. Pretty accurate. He could throw a level 1 ball where he's got to zip it in there. He could throw a level 2 ball where he just kind of gets it over somebody, but in front of another defender. And then finally, on a deep post or a go route, Duckworth certainly has the arm strength to throw the ball way down the field. Seeing that, and then again, as I was noting him earlier in the show, talking about, we're looking at a guy that just athletically, he did everything wrong. Like didn't have good ball security, didn't read the rush quite the way he should have. And he not only avoided it, he scored from over 90 yards away. When you combine those two and there's still a ceiling that he hasn't even come close to touching, I could see why Florida State just offered him. as reported by 24/7 Noles and several other outlets, he's got his offer now. And to be honest with you, I wondered when that was going to happen. But let's get back into that point I made about political. Mobile is only a little over 3 hours from Tallahassee, depending on how fast you drive, obviously. That would be a home run for Florida State in many different ways. Number one, that's an extension of Florida. You're 50 minutes, give or take, from Mobile to get to Pensacola on I-10. Further, you're looking at a scenario where the kids where he's at know a lot of the recruits that Florida State goes after. They recruit Alabama, obviously. They certainly recruit the Panhandle. Hint, Amari Clemons, who I'm going to talk about here in about 5 minutes, is from just outside the area he is, right off I-10, just like him. He's the most recent running back commitment. And there's the kids in Georgia. They're all going to know him. That continuity is important. Florida State would not only gain an elite quarterback, they would gain a kid that is somewhat local. And to be honest with you, in some ways, he's more part of where the FSU kids normally come from than some of the other guys, because like South Florida is a totally different world. And I know the Noles recruited hard, but the Panhandle, South Alabama, South Georgia, those kids are all pretty much the same, even though the state moniker is different. One's different state than the other. Florida State is going to do a great job in those areas if they focus on it. The kids are very like-minded. I think he would be a great addition to the Florida State roster. Now, to be clear, again, if I could just take one player in this class, I'd take Keisean Henderson. If you're going to go outside the region, go get him, and they've got in-home with him, etc. Maybe that's your guy. But I think Landon Duckworth, from all the things put together, makes the most sense, and I would think is the most likely. At one point, they almost had him committed at UCF because Gus was recruiting him there. He fits the offense to a T, high ceiling. He's from Mobile. He's a guy that has all those attributes that you just can't teach. I'm curious to see, to be honest with you, how Duckworth does at like an Elite 11 or anything else, because good Lord, he has the physical traits. If he figures it out, like his ceiling is so high, it's ridiculous. Kind of like Keisean. And here's the fun thing with him. To really test just how good Duckworth is and to kind of think about the big box picture of what Florida State should do at quarterback, I did something that I honestly think that everybody should do if they have the time. Don't just go watch the young man's huddle film and watch football. If you go to his huddle page, there are basketball highlights. If you want to see the IQ working as well as him dunking on people, etc., watch the highlights for Landon Duckworth. He can jump like crazy. That's fantastic. And it's a lot of fun. Show your kid, whatever. Go ahead. But it's the opportunity to pass up his own shot. He can stroke it from outside. He's got a good three-point shot. He passed up a number of shots for himself to allow his teammate to get an even better look at the rim. That translates to any kind of football, and especially if you are a field level guy that is just looking at things play to play, just what can I do to make this better? That field general, every play is different. I don't care if we got 80 yards in the last play, went -10. We're going to do the best we can. He adjusts. He doesn't care what the score is or what his scoring statistics are. He gets his teammates involved. That's the kind of quarterback I want. I think that Florida State, Bo Bentley's kind of that way. Keisean's that way. I see what they're looking for here. They want a guy that is going to find a way to spread the ball around. And while they can certainly go make people look crazy, like Bentley had like 50-some touchdowns last year too. All three of them are incredible. If you find guys like this, especially more local, I think it's going to have a really big impact on them. And I'm a big fan of Duckworth. I don't know where he's going to end up in the rankings, but here's just one example. We're just getting started with the 26 rankings. Here's what Rivals has Landon Duckworth at right now. And again, this could change rather quickly. 45th in the nation, the third mobile quarterback, and the fourth player in Alabama. I can tell you from living in the state of Alabama, this next group is another loaded cycle. He's a young man that I think will end up being top 20 in just about any quarterback competition, whether it's run pass guys, pocket guys, whatever. But most importantly, he's a kid that can fit into the offense. He's a local kid. So you're getting the whole package if you were to get him. To my knowledge, Bama is not after him. Auburn's recruiting him, but they're recruiting some other kids too. I'm not sure how that's going to go. And to that end, Auburn also just got Deuce Knight, who grew up about 50 minutes from Mobile. I'm sure they know each other. And I doubt they're going to play at the same school. So while you would normally be recruiting against Alabama and or Auburn for him, you may not. South Carolina's been hot with him at one point or another because he was committed early before everybody started offering. Maybe they get back involved. But Florida State might steal a really good player out of state Alabama. That is hard to do. There are so many stars aligning for this kid. I would think he's the best bet to end up at Florida State. When we come back, we're going to talk about the running back who is going to be a part of Florida State and what's next for Florida State recruiting. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing what you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Amari Clemons has added his name to the Florida State commitment list for the class of 2026. This is an important commitment, kind of like I was just talking about with Duckworth. It's a kid from Mariana, just a little bit west of Tallahassee, about an hour or so down the road, right off I-10. It's a player that had visited last weekend and this weekend we just ended. So the last two makes his commitment. 5'10", 180, 185 pounds, really shifty kid. Has good speed in the open field. And to my surprise, from watching this young man's film, he'll put his head down and he will barrel right through the defender. I was pretty impressed with this film, and I've talked about him a couple times here on Locked On Seminoles, but I like the fact that Florida State's getting really good players that offers like Florida, Miami, etc., and players local. In the last 5 to 10 years, let's be really honest. How many times have you said, wait a minute, Florida State lost that kid and fill in the name of the school? Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, whatever school it was, somewhere along the Panhandle, especially between Pensacola and Tallahassee itself, the Noles have gotten their butt kicked far too many times for local recruits. Getting a kid like Amari early is good. Versatile guy that can catch the ball, run with it, make you miss, all those things, and he's right down the road. Not only do you get him, but I can just tell you this from experience and talking to different people around the industry. When you get a kid that's an hour away, give or take, it's going to be a lot easier to keep him than it would be for getting that same level of player, let's say from Arizona or Chicago or something like that. Florida State needs to win more battles in the Panhandle. Amari Clemons allows him to do that. He's a top 50 kid in Florida, very, very conservatively for the class of 26. If you're top 50 in Florida, you're a dude. He has a lot of upside. And I was really happy to see that he visited not once, but twice in back-to-back weekends. He could have went to Miami. He could have went to Florida. He could have went to Auburn or somewhere else like that because he's got offers all over the place. He wanted to be a Florida State Seminole. He's going to be able to help transcend this class. They just had a great junior day weekend. Talk more about that tomorrow in totality. I just wanted to get the quarterback and running back news out of the way today. But really important to get that kid because now you can start building block. You're believe it or not, as crazy it is, even after losing Smigiel, you're probably pretty focused on just a handful of quarterbacks. You got your running back, got a bunch of guys on campus already, some Marion Wingo and some other guys, really good players that have visited. They're in a pretty good spot considering all the things that's happened at Florida State. And again, we'll go over more of the junior day list tomorrow. There'll be more news, but I was pretty impressed that Florida State got Amari Clemons on campus back-to-back weekends, got him to commit. And everything's solidified considering the new staff compared to where I thought it was be. I thought this junior day list, if you'd have asked me 3-4 weeks ago, I'd been like, new staff, we'll see how it goes, but I'm not super optimistic. They did a really good job. So hats off to the Florida State staff on the coaching staff itself, as well as the people in the back office and everybody involved with recruiting. Great job by all of them. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you making it the first listen that you have and stopping in and talk some Noles with me. If you would, hit that like button, that notification bell, and please subscribe to this podcast. I truly appreciate it. And if you would, talk about Florida State with your friends and mention Locked On Seminoles so I can get in front of Noles fans. Thank you again, and I will see you again on Tuesday.